In the mid-1990s, the world of professional wrestling faced a serious challenge: the steroid trials. These trials centered around Vince McMahon, the head of WWE, known then as WWF. The government accused McMahon of distributing steroids to his wrestlers, leading to a significant legal battle. Of the 6 charges initially brought against McMahon, half were dismissed before the trial truly began. However, the other 2, one for distributing steroids and one for conspiracy to distribute, almost brought the entire company to its knees. During the 1980s, wrestling was dominated by muscled, larger-than-life characters. Steroid use was widespread in the sport, with estimates suggesting that about 90% of wrestlers used some form of these substances. This era was marked by extraordinarily large physiques, a stark contrast to the more athletic builds seen in earlier decades. This was also the dawn of Hulkamania, a cultural phenomenon that propelled wrestling to new heights of popularity and firmly integrated it into mainstream pop culture. Vince McMahon, the man at the helm of this transformation, didn't just see wrestling as a sport. To him, it was a platform for creating superstars, icons as much about charisma as physical prowess. Wrestlers like the Ultimate Warrior and Macho Man Randy Savage perfectly embodied McMahon's vision. They were not just athletes, but also showmen, with immense bodies and captivating personalities that blurred the line between sports and entertainment. Of course, these massive physiques weren't achieved overnight. Many wrestlers followed strict training and bodybuilding routines for years. However, some resorted to performance-enhancing drugs like anabolic steroids and human growth hormones. This trend wasn't unique to wrestling. Similar issues were seen in major sports like the NFL and the Olympics. The use of such substances raised critical questions, not just about fair competition, but also about the health risks to the athletes. In 1987, under Vince McMahon's leadership, the WWF introduced a wellness policy. However, this policy primarily targeted recreational drugs like marijuana and cocaine rather than performance enhancers. This focus shift was partly due to a high-profile controversy involving the Iron Sheik and Jim Duggan. The two were arrested on suspicion of DUI and found in possession of marijuana and cocaine. Their arrest disrupted kayfabe, the staged reality of wrestling, because they were publicly seen together despite an ongoing on-screen feud. Concerned about the media fallout, McMahon fired them and implemented a drug testing policy. Yet, despite these measures, wrestlers continued to obtain and use anabolic steroids. A critical question remained: how were wrestlers obtaining performance-enhancing drugs? Enter Dr. George Zahorian. A physician appointed by the Pennsylvania State Athletic Commission, Zahorian was closely involved with WWF events in the mid-80s and even made on-screen appearances. Television segments played a key role in distributing steroids to many wrestlers. This practice became illegal following the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1988, which prohibited the distribution of steroids without a medical purpose. It was widely known within the company that Dr. Zahorian was supplying steroids to wrestlers. Despite this, he continued to work with the WWF even after the law came into effect. In a revealing statement from July 1991, Vince McMahon himself admitted to purchasing steroids from Zahorian in 1987. This reflected the extent of Zahorian's involvement and the acceptance of his activities within the WWF. Anita Scales, an employee of Titan Sports, the parent company of WWF, recognized the risks associated with Zahorian's actions and recommended his removal. She brought her concerns to Linda McMahon and Pat Patterson, but they were initially dismissed. Patterson allegedly remarked that wrestlers needed their candy, highlighting a dismissive attitude towards the seriousness of steroid use. By late 1989, the tone within the WWF leadership began to change as they became aware of a federal investigation into Zahorian's activities. Linda McMahon, in a memo to Pat Patterson, expressed concern about a potential state investigation into illegal drug use, including steroids. She mentioned a conversation with Vince McMahon and a warning from a State Department official about investigations involving Dr. Zahorian. Consequently, Vince agreed with Linda's suggestion to prevent Zahorian from attending WWF events. This decision marked a significant shift in the WWF's handling of the steroid issue, coinciding with broader legal actions considered by the Department of Justice. The case against Zahorian intensified when a former client, weightlifter William Dunn, cooperated with the FBI. Dunn recorded a conversation with Zahorian, leading to evidence of Zahorian destroying documents. This evidence linked him to several wrestlers, culminating in his indictment in February 1991 on 15 counts, including distributing steroids to wrestlers like Rick Martel and Roddy Piper. The WWF managed to prevent Hulk Hogan from testifying, though the testimonies of other wrestlers were damaging. Zahorian's defense that he was unaware of the law change was dismissed, leading to his sentencing in December 1991. Hulk Hogan's involvement became a focal point of contention. In 1991, he denied steroid abuse on the Arsenio Hall show, but later admitted to limited use under medical supervision. Following this, the WWF tightened its wellness policy, imposing stricter testing and penalties for steroid use. In November 1993, Vince McMahon faced charges of steroid distribution and conspiracy. The prosecution's evidence included a check payable to Zahorian and allegations that McMahon distributed steroids. However, the defense argued the steroids were not for wrestlers, but for personal use by others. Key testimonies, including Hogan's, stated that McMahon never encouraged steroid use. The only direct accusation came from wrestler Kevin "Nails" Wachholtz, whose credibility was questioned. Ultimately, McMahon was acquitted as the prosecution couldn't directly link him to distributing steroids to wrestlers. While WWE and McMahon might have escaped harsh penalties, the issue of drug use persisted. In 2007, suspicions arose involving 10 wrestlers, including high-profile names like Rey Mysterio, Randy Orton, and Edge, for violating WWE's wellness policy. Mr. Kennedy, also suspended, publicly denied steroid use and emphasized WWE's regular drug testing and stricter policies. Tragically, several deaths in the wrestling community were linked to steroid use. Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, and others suffered fatal consequences. The case of Chris Benoit was particularly disturbing. Steroids were found in his home following the tragic deaths of himself, his wife, and his son, raising questions about the role of steroids in the tragedy. Repeated concussions and steroid abuse painted a grim picture of the toll professional wrestling took on athletes' bodies and minds. Rick Rude's death in 1999, Curt Hennig's in 2003, and Umaga's in 2009 further underscored these issues. The wrestling industry has since shifted away from the era of big, muscle-bound wrestlers to a more diverse representation of athleticism. Today, wrestlers typically exhibit smaller, more athletic physiques, reflecting a broader range of wrestling styles and evolving audience preferences. Organizations like WWE have implemented stricter health and wellness policies, including enhanced drug testing for steroids, concussion protocols, and comprehensive wellness programs. These initiatives aim to safeguard the health and well-being of wrestlers, addressing the physical and psychological challenges of the sport.